We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, A Life Built on Lies. Marcus Reed tapped his pen against the stack of Civil War essays, his wire-rimmed glasses sliding down his nose as he leaned forward at his desk. The last bell had rung 5 minutes ago, and his AP history students shuffled out of the classroom, their backpacks heavy with textbooks and teenage dreams. Mr. Reed? Jenny Chen lingered by his desk, her dark eyes darting to the doorway. Could you look at my essay outline again? Of course. Marcus noticed how she gripped her notebook, knuckles white against the spiral binding. As she placed it on his desk, a folded note slipped between the pages. Jenny's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. My dad. He's been acting weird since he started working with this new client. He keeps checking over his shoulder, even at home. Last night, I heard him arguing with someone on the phone in Mandarin. He never uses Mandarin for work calls. Marcus maintained his concerned teacher expression while his mind cataloged the details. David Chun was one of the top cybersecurity experts in the state. A man with his expertise getting spooked meant something significant was happening. That must be worrying, Marcus said, keeping his voice gentle. He opened the note under the pretense of reviewing her outline. The handwriting was shaky. Dad deleted all his files yesterday. He said if anything happens to him, I should tell you he was right about Project Athena. I'm sure it's just stress from the new contract, Marcus said, smoothly slipping the note into his pocket. But if you're ever concerned about your safety or your father's, my door is always open. Jenny nodded, relief flickering across her face. As she left, Marcus felt the familiar weight of his past settling back onto his shoulders. 10 years of building this identity, the passionate history teacher who brought donuts on exam days and chaperoned homecoming, and now was threatening to unravel. Mike Torres poked his head into the classroom. Mr. Reed? Got a minute? Come in, Mike. Marcus gestured to a chair, studying one of his most promising students. Mike clutched a glossy brochure in his hand, excitement radiating from his face. Remember how I was worried about college tuition? This company, Athena Global, they're offering me a full scholarship. All I have to do is intern with them during summers and commit to working there for 3 years after graduation. Mike thrust the brochure forward. They said my test scores and leadership activities made me a perfect candidate. Marcus accepted the brochure, his stomach tightening as he recognized the logo, a stylized owl with penetrating eyes. That's quite an opportunity, Mike. Mind if I look this over tonight? I have some contacts in the private sector who might be able to give us more information about the company. That'd be great. Mike's phone buzzed. Oh shoot, I'm late for practice. Thanks, Mr. Reed. Alone in his classroom, Marcus pulled out his phone and sent a text to his wife. Running late. Need to prep for tomorrow's lecture. Sarah's response came quickly. No problem. Hindi yoga anyway. Don't work too hard. Red heart. Marcus opened his laptop and pulled up a private browser window. 3 weeks ago, he'd noticed Sarah adding extra passwords to her phone. 2 weeks ago, she'd started taking evening yoga classes that didn't appear on the studio's schedule. Last week, he'd overheard her end a phone conversation abruptly when he entered their kitchen. The signs were familiar. He taught them to assets and agents during his CIA days. Create patterns that explain unusual behavior. Establish alibis that are difficult to verify. Maintain normal routines to avoid suspicion. Marcus typed Athena Global Careers into the search bar. The company's website was polished, professional, too perfect. Their executive team's backgrounds read like composite identities. Prestigious universities, impressive career trajectories, philanthropic work. No gaps, no inconsistencies, no human messiness. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unlisted number. Coffee tomorrow? The usual place. Grace Chun. His former handler hadn't contacted him in 5 years. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Marcus began his end-of-day routine, straightening desks and erasing the whiteboard. Through the windows, he watched students stream toward the parking lot, their lives still simple enough to fit inside backpacks and Instagram posts. A black sedan pulled into a spot across the street. The driver remained inside, engine running. Marcus recognized the stance, surveillance position, optimal view of both the main entrance and his classroom. He gathered his papers and laptop, maintaining the unhurried pace of a teacher with nowhere important to be. As he walked to his car, he cataloged details 8 years of CIA operations had ingrained. License plate number, driver's build, make and model of the sedan. The drive home took 17 minutes longer than usual. Marcus used the time to confirm he was being followed. The black sedan stayed 3 cars back, professional but not invisible to someone who knew what to look for. He pulled into his driveway just as Sarah's car disappeared around the corner, heading to her supposed yoga class. Through their bedroom window, he glimpsed the shadow of their neighbor watering plants. Mrs. Rodriguez, 73, had lived next door for 20 years. She'd been delighted when the nice history teacher and his nurse wife moved in, bringing homemade cookies and local gossip. Marcus wondered what she'd think if she knew the truth about her neighbors. That the man who helped her with her groceries had once orchestrated regime changes. That the woman who checked her blood pressure might be involved with something that had spooked one of the country's top cybersecurity experts. Inside, Marcus headed to his home office. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop, but his attention was on the surveillance equipment he'd installed throughout the house. Tiny cameras and microphones, hidden in smoke detectors and light fixtures, feeding into a secure server in the basement. He pulled up the footage from the previous week. Sarah's yoga classes had a pattern. Each one corresponded with meetings at a small coffee shop downtown. Her companion was always the same man, mid-40s, expensive suit, careful movements that spoke of military training. Marcus zoomed in on the man's face. Michael Caine, according to his business card, which Sarah had dropped in their kitchen trash. Financial advisor with an office in the business district. Marcus had already vetted the office. It existed, but had only been established 6 months ago. The sound of a car door closing drew his attention to the window. Sarah was home early, carrying a yoga mat she hadn't used. She walked up their front path, phone pressed to her ear. Marcus switched to the current feed from the kitchen as Sarah entered. Her voice carried clearly through the hidden microphone. "The insurance policy is set," she said into the phone. "Once the Russians handle our problem, we'll be set for life." A pause. "No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy with his students to notice." Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. Sarah's voice was different, clipped, professional, lacking the warmth he'd grown accustomed to over their marriage. It was the voice of a stranger. A soft knock at his office door made him close the surveillance feeds. "Come in." Sarah stuck her head in, smiling. "Hey, honey. Good class?" "The usual." He returned her smile, noting the slight tension around her eyes. "How was yoga?" "So relaxing. I really needed it." She crossed to his desk and kissed his cheek. "I'm making pasta for dinner. Want some?" "Sounds great. Let me finish grading these essays first." After she left, Marcus opened his secure email account. A message from Ray Martinez was waiting. Package acquired. Meeting arranged. Watch your 6. Marcus began composing his response when movement on one of his monitors caught his eye. A familiar face at the coffee shop across from the school. Dmitry Volkov, former Russian intelligence operative. Their paths had crossed in Tehran years ago. The encounter had left Dmitry with a permanent limp and Marcus with a scar on his left shoulder. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture he didn't want to see. Sarah's secret meetings. David Chen's fear. Mike's too-perfect scholarship offer. And now Dmitry's appearance. His phone buzzed again. Grace's number. "Tomorrow's coffee is non-negotiable. The Russians are moving, and your wife is in the middle of it." From downstairs, the smell of garlic and basil wafted up. Sarah was humming as she cooked, playing her role perfectly. Marcus closed his laptop and stood, straightening his tie in the mirror. Time to play his role too. He had 43 minutes until dinner. 43 minutes to decide how much of his carefully constructed life he was willing to burn down to uncover the truth. Chapter 2. Shadows from the Past. The early morning sunlight streamed through the coffee shop windows as Marcus settled into his usual corner table. He positioned himself with a clear view of both entrances, noting the other patrons, 2 college students with laptops, a businessman reading the paper, a barista wiping down tables with practiced efficiency. Grace Chin materialized in the seat across from him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She hadn't changed much in 5 years. Same sharp eyes, same practical haircut, same ability to appear without warning. "You look domestic," she said, sliding 1 cup toward him. "The sweater vest is a nice touch. Very history teacher chic." "You look tired," Marcus countered, noting the shadows under her eyes. "Whatever brought you here must be keeping you up at night." Grace's smile tightened. "The Russians are making moves, Marcus. Big ones. And somehow your wife is connected to an operation we've been tracking." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. 3 weeks ago, David Chun contacted us about suspicious activity in his company's networks. 2 days later, he withdrew his complaint and went silent. Yesterday, he downloaded terabytes of data from secure servers, then wiped everything clean. Marcus thawed a Jenny's note. His daughter says he's been acting strange. Paranoid? He should be. Grace leaned forward. Chin's company handles cybersecurity for 12 major power grids. Whatever he found scared him enough to risk his career by deleting evidence. She paused. The same day, Chin wiped his servers. Your wife met with this man. She slid a photo across the table. Michael Kane, the financial advisor from Sarah's coffee meetings. "You've been watching my wife?" "We've been watching Kane. Your wife became a person of interest when she started meeting him regularly." Grace's voice softened. "What do you know about her background before you met?" Marcus took a sip of coffee to mask his expression. "Everything in her file checked out. I vetted her thoroughly before we got involved. Maybe you saw what you wanted to see." Grace pulled out another photo. "This was taken 6 years ago, before you met Sarah." The image showed Sarah leaving a building in Dubai. Her hair was shorter, dyed blonde, but it was unmistakably her. She was walking with a man Marcus recognized, James Morrison, former Delta Force operator who'd gone private sector. "That's not possible," Marcus said, even as his mind began reconstructing the past with new information. "Morrison died in a training accident 5 years ago." Grace's laugh was hollow. "Is that what the official report says?" "Interesting. Because he's very much alive. In fact, he's now going by the name Michael Kane." The pieces clicked into place. Kane's military bearing, his too-perfect background, the way he moved like someone used to checking sight lines and escape routes. What's the connection to the Russians? We're not sure yet. But Kane Morrison, whatever he's calling himself, he specializes in making problems disappear for corporations that operate in legal gray areas. And now he's involved with a company called Athena Global. Marcus thought of Mike's scholarship offer. "They're recruiting students from my school, offering full rides to top performers. They're recruiting from schools across the country. Private security firms don't usually take that much interest in education." Grace checked her phone. "I have to go." "But Marcus, whatever's going on with Sarah and Morrison, it's part of something bigger. Chin's not the only cybersecurity expert who's been compromised recently." After Grace left, Marcus sat watching the morning crowd, his coffee growing cold. The businessman with the newspaper had been watching their table with too much interest. Marcus made a show of gathering his things, then headed for the restroom. The businessman followed a minute later. As he pushed open the door, Marcus grabbed his arm, using the man's momentum to slam him against the wall. "Who are you working for?" The man's training showed in his response, a precise countermove that would have worked on most opponents. But Marcus wasn't most opponents. He trapped the man's arm behind his back, increasing pressure until he felt tendon strain. "Athena Global," the man gasped. "We're just supposed to watch. Report your movements." Marcus released him. "Tell Morrison I'm flattered by the attention. But if he wants to know my schedule, he could just ask Sarah." Back home, Marcus checked his surveillance feeds. Sarah had left for her hospital shift at 7 a.m., but the GPS tracker he'd placed on her car showed she was nowhere near the hospital. He pulled up the camera feed from his home office. Sarah was going through his desk drawers, her movements quick and professional. She found the false bottom in the middle drawer, exactly where he'd wanted her to find it. The documents inside were convincing fakes. Old mission reports, account numbers, contact lists. Enough to make her think she discovered his secrets, while the real documents remained secure. Sarah photographed each page with her phone, then carefully replaced everything exactly as she'd found it. Marcus watched her hands move across his desk, remembering how those same hands had tended his wounds after a car accident 2 years ago. Had that care been real, or just part of her cover? His phone buzzed with a text from Ray Martinez. Found something. Council meeting tonight. Usual place. Marcus heard Sarah's car pulling into the driveway. He switched off the surveillance feeds and opened a stack of student essays. When she entered his office, he looked up with a distracted smile. "You're home early. Slow day at the ER." She perched on the edge of his desk. "I thought we could have lunch together." "I'd love to, but I have a department meeting in 20 minutes. He gestured to the essays. "End of semester crunch? You work too hard." She ran her fingers through his hair, and he forced himself not to tense at her touch. "Maybe we should take a vacation this summer. Get away from it all." "That sounds nice." He caught her hand, kissing her palm. "Where would you want to go?" "Somewhere warm. Peaceful." She smiled. "Somewhere we could just disappear for a while." Marcus watched her walk away, noting how her posture changed once she thought he couldn't see her, shoulders squaring, stride lengthening, becoming more purposeful. She moved like someone who'd had combat training. How many other little details had he missed over the years? How many clues had he ignored because he'd wanted so badly to believe in the life they'd built? He turned back to his essays, but his mind was already planning his next moves. He needed to meet with Ray, check on Chin, monitor Mike's correspondence with Athena Global. And somewhere in between, he needed to figure out if any part of his marriage had been real. The red pen moved across student papers, marking errors and suggesting improvements, while in his head, Marcus began constructing the web that would trap Sarah, Morrison, and whoever else was pulling their strings. Chapter 3. The board takes shape. The bar was exactly the kind of place Ray Martinez would choose for a meeting. Dark enough to hide faces, loud enough to mask conversations, with sight lines to all exits and a kitchen door that led to an alley. Marcus spotted his former teammate at a corner booth, baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "You look like shit," Ray said as Marcus slid into the seat across from him. "Private sector's been good to you too." Marcus noted the new scar on Ray's neck, partially hidden by his collar. "What did you find?" Ray pulled out his phone, showing Marcus a document. Kane's real name is James Morrison. Ex-Delta Force, went private sector after a mission in Yemen went sideways. He specializes in making problems disappear for corporations that operate in legal gray areas. "I know about Morrison. Grace filled me in this morning." "Did she tell you about this?" Ray swiped to another document, a marriage certificate. Sarah wasn't just meeting Morrison for coffee. They've worked together before. Multiple operations dating back 8 years. Marcus studied the document, his jaw tightening. 8 years. Before he'd even met Sarah. "There's more," Ray said, sliding a USB drive across the table. Athena Global isn't just a security firm. They're positioning themselves to take control of infrastructure through shell companies and strategic acquisitions. Power grids, water treatment facilities, transportation networks. They're building an invisible empire. And they're starting with schools, Marcus added, thinking of Mike's scholarship offer. Smart play. Shape the next generation, control the future. Ray took a swig of his beer. "Your school board meeting tomorrow night?" 3 new members have interesting backgrounds. Thomas Wilson, former NSA analyst. Maria Delgado, worked for a defense contractor specializing in psychological operations. James Parker, 20 years military intelligence. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Red Art." He checked his surveillance app. Sarah's car was parked outside a high-end apartment building downtown. Morrison's residence, according to Ray's intel. "The insurance documents showed up on my desk last week," Marcus said. "New policy, big payout." Sarah made sure I saw them. Classic setup. Ray leaned back, studying his friend's face. "What's your play here?" Before Marcus could answer, the door opened and Rachel Torres, Mike's mother, walked in. She was a local journalist, known for investigating corporate corruption. Her presence wasn't a coincidence. "Mr. Reed?" She approached their table, notepad in hand. "I'm glad I ran into you. I've been trying to reach you about some unusual patterns in the school board's recent decisions." Marcus gestured for her to join them. "What kind of patterns?" "All their new contracts are going to subsidiaries of the same parent company. security upgrades, curriculum software, even the cafeteria food service. She pulled out a stack of documents. And then there's this scholarship program targeting our top students. Athena Global, Marcus said. Rachel's eyes narrowed. You know about them? They offered Mike a scholarship. Marcus watched her expression shift from concern to fear. Have you looked into their other recruitment targets? That's why I wanted to talk to you. All the students they've approached share certain characteristics. High test scores, leadership positions, influential parents. She lowered her voice. And they all have access to sensitive information through their families' jobs. The kitchen doors swung open and Kevin Wong, Franklin High's IT administrator, hurried toward their table. His normally calm demeanor was shaken. Mr. Reed, I need to show you something. He opened his laptop, displaying lines of code. I've been monitoring unusual patterns in our network traffic. Someone's been harvesting student data, not just grades and attendance, but detailed behavioral profiles. Communications, social media activity, family connections. Marcus examined the code while Rachel took notes. The data collection was sophisticated, designed to build comprehensive profiles of potential assets. When did this start? He asked. Right after the new board members were appointed. Kevin pushed his glasses up his nose. But here's the weird part. The security protocols are military grade. This isn't some random hacker. Whoever designed this system has serious resources. Rachel's phone chimed. Another board meeting just got scheduled for tomorrow night. Emergency session to discuss security upgrades. Let me guess, Ray interjected. Closed to the public? Of course. Rachel gathered her documents. Mr. Reed, if you have any information about what's really going on, I'll be in touch, Marcus promised. After she left, he turned to Kevin. Can you trace where the data is being sent? I've tried. The encryption is unlike anything I've seen before. Kevin hesitated. But I think someone else is watching too. Sometimes I catch traces of another program in the system. It's like we have a guardian angel, blocking the worst of the surveillance attempts. Marcus's phone buzzed again. A message from Jenny Chun. Dad's acting weird again. He just deleted all his files and bought plane tickets to Taiwan. So we might need to leave quickly. Ray read the message over Marcus's shoulder. Chen spooked. If he runs now, we lose our best lead on Athena's endgame, and they'll send someone to silence him before he can talk. Marcus stood, calculating times and distances. Kevin, I need you to do something. If anyone asks, I was here all night discussing network security concerns. Where are you really going? To make sure the Chun family survives until tomorrow, Marcus headed for the door, then paused. Ray, get Rachel whatever protection you can. Once she publishes her story, she'll be a target too. Outside, Marcus checked his surroundings before getting into his car. The pieces were coming together. Sarah's betrayal, Morrison's operation, Athena's infiltration of the school system. But the full picture was still unclear. His phone lit up with a final text from Sarah. Miss you. Can't wait to plan that vacation. Red heart. Marcus started his car, his mind already mapping out contingency plans. Sarah wanted him to believe she was just a cheating wife plotting with her lover. Morrison wanted him to focus on the personal betrayal rather than the bigger picture. They thought they were playing him, but they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd assumed that 10 years of teaching had softened him, made him forget who he used to be. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The night stretched out before him, full of shadows and secrets. By morning, he would either have the answers he needed, or he would be dead. Either way, the facade of Marcus Reed, mild-mannered history teacher, was about to crumble. And somewhere in the city, Sarah was with Morrison, planning his destruction, unaware that her own carefully constructed world was about to collapse around her. Chapter 4. First Blood. Marcus's red pen hovered over a student's essay about the Battle of Gettysburg when a security system vibrated against his wrist. For distinct patterns, perimeter breaches at the north, east, and west entrances of the school building. Professional configurations. He tapped his tablet, bringing up the surveillance feeds. For men in maintenance uniforms moved through the hallways, their movements betraying their military training. Marcus noted their weapons bulges beneath loose coveralls, the comm units in their ears, the way they cleared corners before advancing. A message popped up on his screen. Mr. Reed? There are weird men in the building. They asked about you. Jen. Marcus switched cameras. Jenny Chin crouched behind a car in the parking lot. Phone raised to record the school's entrances. Her father's cybersecurity training showing through. Always document suspicious activity. Stay hidden, he texted back. Call your father. Tell him it's starting. He opened his desk drawer, removing the ceramic blade he'd taped underneath. Standard metal detectors wouldn't catch it, a lesson learned in Kandahar. The weight felt familiar in his palm as he considered his options. The classroom offered numerous advantages. Choke points at the doors, improvisable weapons, multiple exit routes. He began calculating angles and distances, muscle memory from his CIA days taking over. The first attacker entered through the front door, weapons still concealed. Mr. Reed? Maintenance check. Come in. Marcus kept his voice pleasant, maintaining his teacher persona. Just finishing up some grading. Two more appeared at the back door. The fourth would be positioning himself by the window's standard tactical formation. They thought they had him cornered. The first man approached his desk, hands sliding toward his jacket. We need to discuss some building concerns. Marcus launched into action. His ceramic blade found the first man's carotid artery before the weapon cleared his jacket. As the body dropped, Marcus grabbed the heavy American history textbook from his desk and hurled it at the second attacker's face. The impact bought him the half-second he needed to close distance. The second man's neck snapped with a precise application of force. Marcus caught his falling weapon, a suppressed Makarov. Russian-made, confirming his suspicions about who had sent them. The third attacker managed to fire twice. Both shots went wide as Marcus used his desk as cover. He emerged with the Makarov, putting 2 rounds through the man's chest. The fourth man tried to retreat. Marcus pursued, catching him in the hallway. A quick strike to the solar plexus doubled him over. Marcus dragged him into the supply closet, zip-tying him to a shelf. Who sent you? The man spat blood. Go to hell? Marcus picked up a bottle of industrial cleaning fluid. This contains sodium hydroxide. Highly caustic. I could pour it in your eyes, or... He paused. You could tell me who arranged this hit. The wife. The man's accent was distinctive. St. Petersburg training program. She provided your schedule, habits, security patterns. And Morrison? What's his role? I don't know Morrison. Our orders came through regular channels. Professional contract. Marcus heard footsteps approaching. He pressed the Makarov against the man's temple. One last chance. What's Athena Global's endgame? They're building something. Infrastructure takeover is just phase 1. The school program, it's about identifying potential assets. Students with access, influence. The man's eyes darted to the door. That's all I know. I swear. The footsteps grew closer. Marcus squeezed the trigger, adding another body to his count. The suppressor kept the sound contained. His phone buzzed. Kevin Wong. Security logs showing tampering. Someone's erasing camera footage. Can you trace it? No. But it's weird. They're only erasing footage of the attackers, leaving everything else intact. Like someone's cleaning up after you. Marcus heard sirens in the distance. He had minutes to disappear the evidence. His phone rang. Grace Chun. I'm sending a cleanup team, she said without preamble. This isn't just about Sarah anymore. Athena Global is moving faster than we anticipated. The infrastructure play is bigger than we thought. I know. One of them talked before he died. We'll handle the bodies. But Marcus, be careful. Sarah and Morrison aren't just playing house. They're pieces in a bigger game. Marcus began systematically removing traces of the fight. I'm transferring our assets to secure accounts tonight. Making it look like I'm spooked running. Good. Let them think they have you rattled. But watch your back. This is just the beginning. By the time Grace's team arrived, Marcus was back at his desk grading papers. The bodies were hidden, the blood cleaned up, the evidence contained. To anyone passing by, it looked like a normal Tuesday afternoon. His phone lit up with a text from Sarah, working late again. Don't wait up. Red art. Marcus allowed himself a small, grim smile as he typed his response, miss you. Stay safe out there. He wondered if she'd recognize the threat beneath the concern. Probably not. She still thought she was dealing with a retired operative who'd gone soft teaching history to teenagers. Time to show her exactly how wrong she was. Chapter 5. Counterattack. Sarah noticed the changes in Marcus's behavior over the next week. Exactly the changes he wanted her to see. He started taking a longer route to school, one that passed through areas with limited surveillance coverage. He began leaving his laptop unlocked when he went to shower. He made several large cash withdrawals from their joint account. All the signs of a man who knew he was being hunted. From the hidden camera in their bedroom, Marcus watched Sarah rifle through his briefcase late one night. She found the plane tickets to Buenos Aires, fake ones he'd planted there. He observed the satisfaction in her expression as she photographed them with her phone. His burner phone buzzed. Jenny Chun. Dad's files are encrypted, but I found something. Sending now. The files revealed Athena Global's student surveillance program in granular detail. They weren't just collecting grades and attendance records. They were building psychological profiles, mapping family connections, tracking social media activity, creating dossiers on potential future assets. Marcus forwarded the intel to Grace, then called Ray. Morrison took the bait, Ray reported. He just deployed another team. They're staging at the warehouse on Dixon Street. How many? 3-man team. Professional hitters, but not Russian this time. Looks like Blackwater alumni. Marcus checked his watch. Good. Keep monitoring. I'll handle the rest. He switched to another line. Mike Torres. Mr. Reed? I got that internship with Athena Global. They want me to start next week. Excellent work, Mike. Keep your eyes open. Document everything. There's something weird, though. They have me signing all these NDAs. Really specific ones about information control and future employment restrictions. That's normal for security firms. Just stay alert and remember what we discussed about information compartmentalization. Marcus ended the call and pulled up the surveillance feed from Morrison's apartment. Sarah was there, as expected. Their argument was getting heated. The first team failed, Sarah snapped. He's not as soft as you claimed. Morrison paced the room. He's still vulnerable. The Russian team was sloppy. My guys are professionals. You don't know him like I do. He's not going to run. He's going to fight. Then we'll give him something to fight. The warehouse team is just a distraction. While he's dealing with them, we'll move on the real target. Marcus smiled. Morrison was playing directly into his hands. He switched feeds to the warehouse's exterior cameras. The hit team was moving into position, setting up their ambush. Time to spring the trap. Marcus approached the warehouse through the loading dock, making just enough noise to alert the team to his presence. He wanted them to think they had the advantage. The first shooter revealed his position too early, giving Marcus a clean shot. The suppressed Makarov coughed twice, and the man dropped. The second shooter was better trained. He maintained cover, laying down suppressing fire while his partner moved to flank. Standard close-quarters combat tactics. But Marcus had prepared the battlefield. The partner triggered the tripwire Marcus had set earlier, detonating a small charge that filled the area with tear gas. In the chaos, Marcus eliminated both remaining shooters with mechanical efficiency. He planted the evidence Morrison would find later. Shell casings from Russian weapons, documents linking the hit team to Sarah's contacts. Seeds of doubt that would grow into paranoia. His phone buzzed Grace. We found something. Sarah's been involved with Athena Global for years. This goes deeper than we thought. I know. Morrison's getting sloppy. Making mistakes. Be careful. When professionals get sloppy, they get desperate. And desperate operators are unpredictable. Marcus was counting on that desperation. He'd spent the week feeding Sarah, and Morrison carefully selected pieces of information, playing them against each other. Sarah now suspected Morrison was planning to betray her. Morrison was beginning to question Sarah's loyalty. Ray's intel about Morrison's daughter in Seattle had been particularly useful. Marcus hadn't made any direct threats. He didn't need to. Just making sure Morrison knew that he knew was enough to add another layer of pressure. The warehouse's gas line had been carefully adjusted earlier. By morning, this would look like an unfortunate industrial accident. Morrison's fingerprints would be all over the operation, adding to Sarah's doubts about his competence. Marcus's phone lit up with another text from Sarah. Miss you. Been thinking about that vacation we discussed. He typed back, me too. Somewhere far away from everything. Just the two of us. Let her think he was considering running away with her. Let her believe her act was still working. The harder she tried to maintain her cover, the more mistakes she would make. The game was shifting. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Chapter 6. The Walls Close In. Kevin Wong's hands shook as he showed Marcus the code on his laptop screen. I recognize this signature. It's Tommy Chin's work. We were roommates at MIT. He always adds this specific encryption key as a kind of signature. Marcus studied the network logs. You're sure? Positive. Tommy works for a tech startup now, but these patterns, it's definitely his code. And look at the timestamps. These breaches started right after the new board members were appointed. Can you trace the data flow? Kevin shook his head. It's bouncing through too many proxies. But the architecture is sophisticated. Military-grade security protocols layered with custom encryption. This isn't just about collecting student information anymore. They're building something bigger. Marcus's phone buzzed. Rachel Torres. They're threatening Mike's scholarship. Anonymous email suggesting his future could be complicated if I continue investigating the school board. Don't respond. Marcus texted back. Forward everything to the encrypted email I gave you. Keep gathering evidence. The school board meeting that evening was tense. Marcus watched from the back of the room as Thomas Wilson, the former NSA analyst, presented proposals for new student safety measures. The Athena global system offers comprehensive protection, Wilson explained to the parents. Real-time monitoring of student communications, behavioral analysis, threat assessment. All completely secure and confidential. A parent raised her hand. Who has access to this data? Only authorized school personnel, Wilson assured her. Everything is protected by state-of-the-art encryption. Marcus noted how Maria Delgado, the psychological operations specialist, subtly guided the conversation away from specific security questions. She was good, using her training to manipulate the parents' fears about school safety. His phone vibrated. Grace, meeting in 10. Urgent. He slipped out of the auditorium and found Grace waiting in his classroom. Athena Global isn't just taking over schools, she said without preamble. They're positioning themselves to control infrastructure in 12 major cities. Power grids, water treatment, transportation networks. The education program is about identifying and recruiting assets for future operations. And Morrison? He's their cleaner. When companies resist takeover attempts, accidents happen. Competitors have unfortunate equipment malfunctions. Key executives develop health problems. Marcus processed the implications. Sarah's been part of this from the beginning, hasn't she? Grace nodded. We found evidence going back years. Her nursing career, your marriage, it was all carefully orchestrated. She was assigned to monitor former CIA assets, assess which ones might pose future threats. And now they want those threats eliminated. Exactly. But something's changed. Sarah's getting sloppy. Making mistakes she wouldn't have made a month ago. Marcus's surveillance app pinged. Sarah was arguing with Morrison in his car, parked 2 blocks from the school. He's going to get us both killed. Sarah's voice came through clearly. He's not some burned-out teacher. He was CIA Black Ops. The best they had? Morrison's reply was cold. You should have mentioned that detail sooner. It might have prevented the Russian team's failure. I told you sending them was a mistake. Marcus isn't running. He's hunting. Then we'll give him something else to hunt. The board meeting tonight. It's the perfect opportunity. Sarah's voice sharpened. We're not improvising. We stick to the plan. The plan changed when your husband started killing our operators. If he exposes the school program, we lose everything. You mean you lose everything? I got insurance. Marcus heard the threat in Sarah's voice. She was starting to turn on Morrison, just as he'd planned. His psychological warfare was working, making them doubt each other, question loyalties, act rashly. His phone buzzed again. Kevin, emergency board meeting called for tomorrow morning. They're pushing through the student monitoring system. Full implementation by next week. Marcus forwarded the message to Grace. They're accelerating their timeline. Getting desperate. Be careful. Morrison's background makes him dangerous enough. But if Sarah's really been Athena Global from the beginning, she's probably had training we don't know about. I'm counting on it. Grace studied his face. You knew, didn't you? About Sarah. Before all this started. I suspected. The signs were there if you knew where to look. Small inconsistencies in her background. Reactions that didn't quite fit her cover story. But I needed proof. And now, Now I have everything I need. Morrison's trying to eliminate Sarah because she knows too much. Sarah's planning to betray Morrison to save herself. They're both so focused on outmaneuvering each other that they don't see the real trap. Marcus's phone lit up with a final text from Sarah, coming home early tonight. We need to talk about our future. The pieces were in place. Sarah and Morrison were turning on each other, their careful plans unraveling. The school board was rushing to implement their surveillance system, making mistakes in their haste. And Marcus had all the evidence he needed to expose the entire operation. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation they'd been building toward. But first, he had one more card to play. Grace, I need you to get Rachel Torres protection. Real protection, not just surveillance. When this breaks, Athena Global will try to silence everyone connected to the story. Already done? But Marcus, be careful. If Sarah's really who we think she is, your marriage wasn't just a cover. It was a long-term operation. Everything she knows about you, everything she learned over the years, she'll use it all? Marcus gathered his papers, maintaining his teacher facade as parents filed past his classroom. I know. That's exactly what I'm counting on. The stage was set. Tomorrow would determine whether his careful manipulation would pay off, or if he'd underestimated his opponents. Either way, the facade was about to shatter. Chapter 7. Endgame. David Chen's fingers trembled over his keyboard as he prepared to execute the network sabotage protocol. Behind him, two Athena Global operatives watched his movements, their presence a silent threat. Remember, the taller one said, make it look like a random attack. Nothing traceable. Chen glanced at his phone. A text from Jenny glowed on the screen. Mr. Reed says proceed as discussed. He began typing, implementing the false attack Marcus had helped him design. To the observers, it looked like he was destroying the school's network infrastructure. In reality, each keystroke carefully preserved critical evidence while appearing to erase it. Across town, Mike Torres sat in Athena Global's sleek conference room, reading through his scholarship contract for the third time. The hidden clauses jumped out at him now. Provisions about information control, requirements for future employment, restrictions on communications. Is something wrong with the contract, Mr. Torres? The HR representative's smile didn't match her sharp tone. Just being thorough, Mike replied, thinking of Mr. Reed's warnings about careful documentation. My mom's a journalist. She taught me to read the fine print. The representative's smile tightened. Speaking of your mother, we understand she's been investigating some sensitive matters. Perhaps you could help her understand the importance of discretion? The threat was clear. Mike maintained a neutral expression as he signed the contract, his other hand pressing record on his phone beneath the table. In the Franklin High Computer Lab, Kevin Wong monitored both operations in real time. He watched Shin's attack unfold while tracking Mike's digital breadcrumbs through Athena's network. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Everything in place? Chin's executing the fake sabotage now. Mike's inside their system. Rachel goes live in 10 minutes. Rachel Torres adjusted her microphone in the Channel 8 news studio. Her producer counted down. 3, 2, 1. Good evening. Tonight, we bring you an exclusive investigation into the growing influence of private corporations in public education. Our source, a former executive at Athena Global, reveals a disturbing pattern of surveillance and control. Marcus watched the broadcast from his position outside Athena's downtown office building. Right on cue, his phone lit up with urgent messages between Sarah and Morrison. They're exposing everything, Sarah texted. We need to contain this now. Morrison's reply came quickly. Meeting at Site B, emergency protocols in effect. Site B, one of Athena's shell companies, housed in an abandoned office complex. Marcus had spent weeks preparing the location, transforming it into an elaborate trap. His phone buzzed again. Grace, teams in position. Waiting for your signal. Marcus checked his weapons one final time. The ceramic blade, the suppressed Makarov, backup pieces strategically hidden throughout the building. Everything in place. He watched through his scope as Sarah's car pulled into the parking garage, followed minutes later by Morrison's black SUV. They took separate elevators to the 14th floor, exactly as he'd predicted. Sarah reached the conference room first, gun already drawn. Morrison entered from the opposite door, his weapon similarly ready. Drop it, Sarah commanded. "This is your mess. You brought them right to us." Morrison's laugh was cold. "My mess? You're the one who couldn't control your husband. Now we're both compromised. You think I didn't have a backup plan?" Sarah's voice dripped contempt. "I've got copies of everything. All of Athena's operations. All the shell companies. All the bribes and blackmail. One phone call, and it all goes public. You really think your father will let you destroy everything he built?" Sarah's stance shifted slightly, the first crack in her composure. "What do you know about my father?" "More than you think." Morrison's finger tightened on the trigger. "Why do you think he assigned you to watch Marcus in the first place? Your marriage wasn't just about monitoring CIA assets. It was about keeping you under control, too. Marcus chose that moment to step out of the shadows." "He's right, Sarah. You weren't just a watcher. You were being watched." Both weapons swung toward him, but he'd already calculated the angles. His first shot knocked Morrison's gun away. The second clipped Sarah's shoulder, forcing her to drop her weapon. "You knew?" Sarah's voice mixed rage and disbelief. "All this time, I knew something wasn't right the day we met. Your background was too perfect, your story too clean." Marcus kept his gun trained on both of them. "But I needed proof of what Athena was really planning. You gave me access to everything I needed." Morrison tried to lunge for his fallen weapon. Marcus's shot caught him in the leg, dropping him to the floor. "The student surveillance program," Marcus continued, "the infrastructure takeovers, the corporate sabotage, it was never about money or power. It was about control, building a network that could manipulate the next generation of leaders." Through the windows, emergency lights began flashing as Grace's teams moved into position. "You don't understand what we're trying to build," Sarah snarled. "The world needs order, structure. We're creating a system that can guide humanity's future." "No," Marcus replied. "You're creating a prison. One where people's lives are controlled before they're even old enough to understand what's happening to them." His phone lit up with confirmation messages. The evidence had been transmitted to law enforcement agencies and news outlets worldwide. Athena's entire network was exposed. Morrison made one final desperate move, pulling a backup weapon from his ankle holster. Marcus's response was instant, 2 shots, center mass. Morrison collapsed, his last attempt at survival ending in failure. Sarah's mask finally shattered completely. "You think this ends with us? My father has contingencies you can't imagine. Athena is bigger than you know." Marcus smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted you to think. You were so focused on manipulating me that you never realized I was using your operation to track down something bigger. The CIA has been investigating Athena for years. Your assignment to spy on me? They allowed it to succeed because it gave them a way in." The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. All her careful planning, her years of deception, she'd been a pawn in a game larger than she'd understood. Grace's tactical team breached the room, weapons ready. Sarah didn't resist as they took her into custody. Her face was a mixture of fury and dawning comprehension as she realized just how completely she'd been outmaneuvered. Marcus watched them lead her away, feeling no satisfaction, no triumph, only a quiet certainty that he'd done what was necessary. His phone buzzed one final time. "Kevin, network attack contained. Evidence secured. We got everything." The endgame was complete. Now came the aftermath. Chapter 8. The Truth in the Ruins. Sarah sat across from Marcus in the FBI interrogation room, her handcuffs glinting under the fluorescent lights. Gone was the loving wife, the dedicated nurse. In her place sat a stranger whose eyes blazed with cold fury. "Was any of it real?" Marcus asked quietly. "Any part of our life together? You want to know if I really loved you?" Sarah's laugh was harsh. "I was trained from childhood for this. My father made sure I understood what was at stake. Love is just another weapon, another tool for control. Your father built Athena Global from nothing, turned it into a shadow empire. But he couldn't control you, could he? That's why he arranged our marriage. Keep his daughter close, monitor a potential CIA threat, elegant solution." Sarah's composure cracked slightly. "You don't know anything about my father. I know he used his own daughter as a pawn, raised you to be a weapon, then kept you leashed through your assignment to watch me." Marcus leaned forward. "But you started believing your own cover story." Started wondering if there could be more to life than manipulation and control. That's why you got sloppy, made mistakes. Part of you wanted to be exposed. You're wrong. But her voice wavered. I never doubted the mission. The mission? Marcus shook his head. Athena wasn't trying to make the world better. They were building a system of control, using schools to identify and manipulate future leaders, using infrastructure to maintain power. Your father wasn't a visionary. He was a dictator in waiting. Sarah's mask finally shattered completely. You have no idea what's coming. You think arresting me and Morrison stops anything? My father's network reaches further than you can imagine. Marcus smiled, a small, sad expression. I know exactly how far it reaches, because I've been investigating Athena Global since before we met. Your assignment to spy on me was allowed to succeed because it gave the CIA a way to monitor the entire operation. The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at Marcus, really seeing him for the first time. All these years, you were playing me? Not all of it was a game. Marcus's voice softened. I wanted to believe we could have a real life. That's why I let it go on as long as it did. But when you started targeting my students, using them as pawns in Athena's schemes, that crossed the line. Grace entered the room, files in hand. We're ready for your official statement, Sarah. But first, you should know, we've already arrested your father. The raids are happening simultaneously across the country. Athena Global is finished. Sarah's last defenses crumbled. The confident operative vanished, leaving behind something broken and lost. He said it was for the greater good. That controlling information, manipulating people, it was necessary for humanity's future. People deserve to choose their own future, Marcus replied. Not have it chosen for them by hidden powers who think they know best. Grace laid out photographs, surveillance images, document scans, network diagrams. The full scope of Athena's operation exposed in damning detail. Your father's vision dies here, Grace said. But you have a choice, Sarah. Help us dismantle what remains of the network, ensure it can't be rebuilt. Or spend the rest of your life in a cell, watching everything you helped build turn to dust. Sarah stared at the evidence of her life's work, her father's legacy. When she finally spoke, her voice was empty of its former conviction. It really was all a lie, wasn't it? Everything I believed, everything I was taught. Not everything, Marcus said quietly. The capacity for change, that's real. The possibility of redemption. Even now. He stood to leave, pausing at the door. I'll be watching the news. Your choice will tell me if any part of what we shared was genuine. Sarah's response was barely a whisper. Would you have loved me? If it had been real? Marcus didn't answer. Some questions were better left in the ruins of what might have been. Chapter 9. Ashes and Renewal. The Franklin High Computer Lab hummed with activity as Kevin Wong installed the new security protocols. This architecture inverts everything Athena tried to build, he explained to the school board. Instead of harvesting student data, it protects their privacy. Instead of creating surveillance tools, it creates safeguards. Jenny Chen watched the installation process, asking technical questions that showed her father's influence. David Chun, cleared of any wrongdoing in the network attack, had already begun developing educational programs about cybersecurity. Students need to understand how to protect themselves, he told Marcus during a planning meeting. Not just from hackers, but from anyone who tries to manipulate their information. Mike Torres sat in on these meetings too, his Athena Global Scholarship now transformed into a legitimate educational fund. I want to study law, he announced. Focus on protecting schools from corporate exploitation. Rachel Torres documented it all, her expose on Athena Global winning national recognition. But she kept the biggest story, Marcus's true role, out of the papers. Some truths were better left in the shadows. Grace visited Marcus's classroom after the final bell. The CIA wants you back. Full reinstatement. Your choice of assignments? Marcus continued grading papers, his red pen marking thoughtful comments in the margins. I didn't do this to get back in. I did it to make sure I could finally get out. Sarah's cooperating. Her testimony will help us dismantle what's left of Athena's network. She asked about you. Some questions don't have answers, Marcus replied. Some bridges stay burned. Grace studied her former operative. noting how naturally he fit into this life he'd chosen. You could have been one of our best field agents. Instead, you're teaching teenagers about the Civil War. I'm teaching them to think critically, to question authority, to understand how power really works. Marcus set down his pen. That's a different kind of operation. A longer game, and a more important one, Grace admitted. The CIA will have to find another agent to run their covert ops. They always do. Marcus stood, gathering his materials. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a class to prepare for. The next morning, Marcus taught his students about the Battle of Gettysburg, about choices and consequences, about the price of change. A new student raised her hand, asking if he believed people could truly overcome their past. Marcus thought about Sarah, about Morrison, about the violence and lies that had shaped his own life, about the choices that had led him here, to this classroom, to this moment. People can change, he told the student, but first they have to want to. And sometimes the price of that change is letting go of who you used to be. Later, alone in his classroom, Marcus received the official notification. Sarah and Morrison were facing federal charges. Athena Global was being dismantled, its assets seized, its operations exposed. His part in it would remain classified, unknown to the students who filled his days with questions about history and life. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and began preparing for tomorrow's lesson. Outside his window, life at Franklin High continued. Students rushing to classes, sharing secrets, planning futures they could now choose for themselves. Marcus Reed, teacher, former CIA operative, guardian of a different kind of truth, allowed himself a moment of peace. He had chosen his path, paid the price for change, and found something real in the aftermath of lies. The bell rang, signaling the start of another class. Marcus picked up his textbook, ready to continue his most important mission, teaching the next generation to think for themselves. Epilogue. 5 years later, Marcus Reed set his coffee mug on his desk at Franklin High, now worn smooth from years of essay grading. The morning sun illuminated a wall of photographs, graduating classes, debate team victories, academic competitions. Each image represented a student who had passed through his classroom, unaware of the battles fought to protect their futures. A news alert flashed on his tablet. Athena Global Assets auction complete. Final corporate holdings dissolved. The article mentioned Sarah Reed's continued cooperation with federal authorities, her testimony instrumental in dismantling the last remnants of her father's empire. She was serving her reduced sentence in a minimum security facility, teaching other inmates computer skills as part of her rehabilitation. Marcus closed the article as footsteps approached his classroom. Jenny Chun, now a junior at MIT studying cybersecurity, appeared in his doorway. "Mr. Reed, Dad said you'd be here early." She carried her laptop, her confidence a far cry from the scared student who had once slipped him a desperate note. "I wanted to show you something before my guest lecture to the Computer Science Club." David Chin followed his daughter into the room. After the Athena Global incident, he had transformed his cybersecurity firm into an educational technology company, developing programs to protect student privacy while teaching digital literacy. "Jenny's new encryption protocol is impressive," David said, pride evident in his voice. "The NSA is already expressing interest. As long as it's used to protect people, not control them," Jenny added, the lessons of the past clearly shaping her future. Marcus's phone buzzed, a message from Mike Torres. Now in his third year of law school at Georgetown, Mike had just accepted a summer internship with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. His mother Rachel's expose on Athena Global had earned her a Pulitzer nomination and launched a successful career investigating corporate corruption in education. "Mom's latest article is dropping tomorrow," Mike's message read. She found another company trying to harvest student data. Nothing on Athena's scale, but still concerning. "Thought you should know." Kevin Wong appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. After helping dismantle Athena's surveillance system, he had been promoted to district technology director. His new network architecture had become a model for schools nationwide. "The annual security audit looks good," Kevin reported. "But I found something interesting. Someone tried to access our old server logs last week. Very sophisticated attempt." Marcus's expression remained neutral, but his mind was already analyzing possibilities. Any idea who? The trace led to a women's correctional facility in upstate New York. Kevin's meaning was clear. Sarah had been testing her old access points. Increase monitoring, Marcus instructed. Forward the logs to Grace. Grace Chin had retired from the CIA 2 years ago, but she maintained contact with her former asset. She now ran a private consulting firm advising schools on security protocols, her cover allowing her to keep watch for any attempts to resurrect Athena's methods. A student stuck her head in the door. Amanda Phillips, captain of the debate team. Mr. Reed, do you have a minute to discuss my thesis on corporate influence in public institutions? Of course. Marcus gestured to a chair, noting how her research topic echoed past events. Students like Amanda represented why he had chosen to remain a teacher. Bright minds learning to question, to investigate, to stand against manipulation. After Amanda left, Marcus opened his secure email. Ray Martinez's weekly update was waiting. Morrison's old contacts were staying quiet, their networks disrupted by Sarah's revelations. The teenage daughter Morrison had hidden in Seattle was thriving, unaware of her father's fate. Ray's security firm now specialized in protecting whistleblowers and journalists, turning his skills toward defending truth rather than hiding it. A notification popped up. A letter from Sarah had arrived at his secure post office box. He received one each year on their anniversary, though he never replied. This one would likely mirror the others. Reflections on their shared deceptions, questions about redemption, and carefully coded warnings about potential threats to the system they had dismantled. The morning bell rang, and students began filing into his classroom. Marcus watched them take their seats, each one carrying hopes and dreams that might have been corrupted if Athena's plan had succeeded. Instead, they were free to choose their own paths. Today we're discussing the Pentagon Papers. Marcus began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. About how the truth, no matter how deeply buried, finds its way to light. His students opened their textbooks, unaware that their teacher had lived the principles he taught. That the mild-mannered history instructor who brought donuts on exam days had helped expose one of the largest conspiracies in modern education. During lunch, Marcus met with the school board, now composed of educators and parents rather than corporate plants. They were discussing a new proposal for student data protection, built on lessons learned from the Athena incident. The Chun-Wang protocol is impressive, the superintendent commented, reviewing the documentation. It's like having a digital immune system protecting our students. Marcus recognized elements of his own experience woven into the security architecture. Jenny and Kevin had designed protocols specifically to detect the kind of manipulation Athena had attempted. The system wasn't just defensive, it taught students to recognize and resist manipulation attempts. After the meeting, Marcus checked his surveillance feeds out of habit. 5 years had passed, but he maintained careful watch for any signs of Athena's methods resurfacing. Grace's intelligence network reported occasional attempts by former operatives to rebuild, but none had gained traction. Sarah's father had died in prison 2 years ago, taking many of Athena's secrets with him. But Marcus knew better than to assume the threat had died with him. Power structures like Athena Global emerged from human nature itself. The desire to control, to shape the future through manipulation rather than education. His phone buzzed with a text from Grace, possible situation developing. New educational technology companies showing familiar patterns. Need your analysis. And so it continued. While Marcus taught his students about history's lessons, he remained vigilant against those who would repeat its mistakes. His classroom was both a sanctuary and a watchtower, his lessons a shield against future manipulation. That evening, Marcus attended a ceremony honoring Rachel Torres's latest investigative series. Mike sat in the audience, his law school textbooks marked with notes about educational privacy rights. Jenny Chun demonstrated her new security protocols to technology directors from across the country. Kevin Wong monitored the school networks, his systems growing stronger with each attempted breach. They had all been changed by their encounter with Athena Global. Instead of being corrupted by the experience, they had emerged as guardians of a different kind of truth, one that empowered rather than controlled. Later, alone in his classroom, Marcus read Sarah's latest letter. Between descriptions of prison life and philosophical musings about redemption, she had hidden a warning: they're trying new methods. Subtler. Watch the pattern recognition software. Some lessons can't be unlearned. He encrypted the letter and forwarded it to Grace for analysis. Sarah's warnings had proved accurate before. Her insight into Athena's methods helping prevent several attempts to rebuild their surveillance networks. The next morning, Marcus would return to teaching his students about the Civil War, about choices and consequences, about the price of freedom. But his real lesson was embedded in how he taught, encouraging critical thinking, questioning authority, recognizing manipulation. His students would graduate and move into a world still filled with those who sought to control through deception. But thanks to their mild-mannered history teacher, they would carry the tools to resist, to think independently, to choose their own paths. And in quiet moments between classes, Marcus would remember Sarah's words from their final confrontation. Would you have loved me? If it had been real. The answer remained in the space between truth and deception, in the lessons learned from a life built on lies, but transformed into something genuine. His greatest victory wasn't in exposing Athena Global, but in choosing to remain Marcus Reed, teacher and guardian, helping shape a future built on education rather than control. The sun set over Franklin High, another day of apparent normalcy coming to a close. But beneath the surface, the work continued. In classrooms and computer labs, in law offices and newsrooms, in security firms and technology companies, the protectors remained vigilant. Marcus opened his lesson planner for the next day. On the surface, it contained straightforward history lessons. But woven through each discussion were the tools his students would need: critical analysis, ethical reasoning, the ability to recognize and resist manipulation. His phone lit up with another message from Grace. New intel suggests movement from old Athena contacts in Europe. Nothing concrete yet. Keep watch. And so he would. The mild-mannered history teacher, who had once been a CIA operative, continued his most important mission: ensuring the next generation would be prepared for whatever battles lay ahead. The night deepened, but lights still burned in offices across the city. Kevin Wong fine-tuning his security protocols. Jenny Chin developing new encryption methods. Mike Torres preparing legal briefs about educational privacy rights. Rachel Torres investigating corporate influence in schools. Each of them, in their own way, carrying forward the lessons learned from their encounter with Athena Global. Marcus Reed adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and began preparing for tomorrow's class. On his desk, beside stacks of essays waiting to be graded, sat the tools of his former trade: secured phones, encrypted tablets, surveillance equipment disguised as ordinary objects. The weapons had changed, but the mission remained the same: protecting the future, one student at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts to control and manipulate. But thanks to the vigilance of a former CIA operative-turned-history teacher and his network of protectors, the students of Franklin High would face those challenges with open eyes and prepared minds. The story of Athena Global had ended, but its lessons lived on in the quiet battles fought each day by those who understood the true price of freedom. And in his classroom, Marcus Reed continued teaching the most important lesson of all: that the power to shape the future belonged not to those who would control through deception, but to those who would illuminate through truth. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.